I'm Jim Collison, and live from the Gallup studios here in Omaha, Nebraska. This is Gallup's Theme Thursday, Season 3, recorded on May 4th, 2017. Theme Thursday is a Gallup webcast series that dives deep into the CliftonStrengths theme, one theme at a time, and today's theme is communication. If you have questions, comments, or contributions during this live webcast, we do have a live chat room. It's available for you right below the main video window. Just look down there. It's available for you. Choose bottom left-hand corner. It'll say log in. Choose the guest account. Put your name in where it says guest. Hit submit. You'll be right in the chat room. You can ask us questions live. That's the best way to interact with us. Don't forget, you can also pop that chat window out if you're on a PC or Mac. There's red boxes in the upper right-hand corner. To click those, it'll pop it out. You can resize it and put it anywhere you want. Great way for you to interact with the program while we are doing. And if you're listening to the recorded version or have questions about custom strengths coaching solutions for small, medium, or large organizations, contact us via email. Just send us an email, coaching@gallup.com. Don't forget to visit the Gallup Strengths Center, just gallupstrengthscenter.com for all your CliftonStrengths coaching resources and training needs. You can also catch the video on both streaming and downloadable audio for offline listening. All past shows, and we have a ton of them available for you. They're all on our coaches blog, which continues to set records, by the way, coaching.gallup.com. Maika Leibbrandt is our host today. She works as a workplace consultant here at Gallup. And Maika, coming in on your phone, welcome to Theme Thursday.
Thanks, Jim. A little bit of adaptability there on our technology. It was fun to watch your Ranger sort of command combination there, take care of everything.
After about 500 of these, you start getting pretty good at figuring out, exactly what needs to get done. And so excited about communication today and excited for our guest coming in from Lincoln. We'll introduce her in a few minutes. But Maika, get us started as we think about communication.
I'm thrilled to talk about this one. I felt this way about almost all of our influencing themes. I want to say that every single one of them is just the epitome of influencing when you think about it as leadership. But every week it feels that way. So I think that these are perfectly positioned to help us understand the power and edge and the potential within leaders in that influencing domain. Communication is all about having this great way with words, and words can be spoken, words can be written. But for leaders with high communication, it really is about how do you take something and elevate it to an emotional level. And if you think about that idea of influencing as an entire leadership domain really is how do you not just do great work, but speak about the work of your team? How do you become a spokesperson, an ombudsman, a great person to shine a spotlight on the great work that you're doing, either outside your team or even outside your organization? And leaders with communication specifically do that by being able to have a great art, a great knack, a great ability to put feelings and thoughts into words. Sometimes it's about putting their own thoughts and feelings into words, but in many cases, it's also about being able to reflect back what somebody else is feeling in a way that they couldn't ever put it together. I'm thrilled that, just a little preview, we're going to get to talk to one of the very first leaders I ever met at Gallup. And she uses communication in such an authentic way. You can just tell that it's a true strength. Very often, when I coach leaders with communication, it pops out as one of those words that if they don't have it very high in their profile, they tend to be worried about. And they usually say, well, how could that be? It's my job to communicate. And I think when you see Sara, you'll really understand how it's different when you authentically have it in your top 5, when the talent theme of communication is something that gives you ease, excellence, and enjoyment and comes naturally. So you get to see that in her. Before we introduce Sara, I just want to take us through the front page of your companion guide. If you haven't downloaded that, feel free to press pause on the video right now. You can go download that. And what we'll do is we'll take you through the first page, and then you can take notes on what you learned from Sara on the back. Communication, the first thing you see there is that long definition. I just want to pull out a few pieces of that definition that really resonate with me. This idea that you believe most people have a very short attention span. They are bombarded by information and very little of it survives. I think that there's a strategy piece to communication that sometimes we miss, and it is that awareness that people don't remember everything you say. People aren't attached to everything that they hear, and there is that thoughtfulness for leaders with high communication of how can my message be the one that sticks? How can I say something or put something together that will really affect the emotion of another person? And so it isn't just talking. It really is about, I think, purposefully considering and practicing and honing and improving upon the way that you can communicate. A couple other pieces I love in this definition. You want to divert their attention toward you and then capture it and lock it in. It drives your hunt for the perfect phrase. It also talks about the fact that to folks with communication, events are static, and you can make it dynamic. You can make it something that adds emotion, so that an idea is never boring, is never dry. Once it comes across your communication, you can breathe life into it. When you think about it that way, it almost sounds like an easy transition to say, what's the difference between communication in an individual contributor versus a leader? But a few of the things that I think about, perhaps with high communication as an individual contributor, you can pick up on the lingo of others. I was watching season 1. Heather Wright talks about that when she coaches. She says that it's really easy for her to realize certain clients speak certain languages, and that might be the acronyms that they're using, or the words that they use to say good things, or different pieces and stories that resonate most with them. People with high communication, because they're paying attention to those words, tend to pick up on it really well. Leaders with high communication, I think, do that, but also they can exhibit or highlight or exert the language of their team and their organization onto a broader spectrum. So it's not just about picking up on the lingo and the cultural words of other people. It's also about being able to influence that by getting your team's language out into the ether. I also think another perhaps extension of communication, when you think about it as leadership, by myself, communication is thinking out loud for myself. I found I have communication number 4 out of my top 5. And one of the first times that I taught a course, I had it all in my head. I had read all the information and I'd taken a couple notes. And I showed up on the first day when it was my turn to get in front of a lot of people and actually teach something. I had never actually said it out loud. And I bombed. It was not a good time. It was not the best I've ever been. In fact, it was really bad. I found myself rambling. I was just kind of on the wrong tone for the group. It didn't work. And I went home that evening realizing, wow, I forgot to give my communication what it needed, which was to think out loud. As a leader, I think it's being able to do that when the thoughts aren't yours, being able to help people put their thoughts into words. And that ability not just to say, I can translate my own thoughts when I speak out loud, but also to be mindful that you've also got this great ability to help other people translate their thoughts in ways that maybe they couldn't. A couple ways that leaders can invest in communication. Think about learning the folklore within your organization. What are the stories that are important to people? Maybe even what are the stories that are important to your individual team members? Communication can take an idea and translate it into a story. And think about, gosh, that's how our world, that's how entire cultures exist, is through spoken stories. So what a powerful place to invest. Ways to get to know your folks, get to know your organization, understand those stories, and turn them into something that is lively and motivating. You could also think about lending that skill to others. Who could you help make more engaging presentations? Think about basing that on your other themes, or maybe the dynamics of your themes, so that you can find perhaps a specific niche that's really true to you. I also think it's important just to look pretty basically at what else can you learn to help you communicate better. Oftentimes when I'm teaching coaching courses, people say, well, that's easy with communication. How do I do it with other themes? I say, really, that's easy? Tell me what you do with communication. And more often than not, it comes up with, join Toastmasters, or take a creative writing class, or, hey, binge watch a show that has a really interesting plot and pay attention to how that plot is told. But it really is, I think, a great opportunity, if it is obvious for you how you might invest in communication, go do it on purpose. Make sure that you're treating yourself at an advanced level and push that even farther. Toward the bottom of our companion guide, we've got our 4 needs of followers. And the way that I'm going to help you think about this are questions that you might ask yourself as a leader in order to provide stability, trust, compassion, and hope to your followers. We'll start with trust. So a leader with communication might build trust by really thinking about how transparent and how aligned are your stories with your beliefs or your values. So a question you might ask yourself, what stories really showcase your values? How can you invite others to open up? part of being a great communicator and having high communication is also that you can listen very well. And so thinking about stretching that in a leadership capacity about making other people feel comfortable speaking. A leader might show the communication theme through compassion. Think about what's the most inspirational way to name your daily tasks or your meetings. This is actually an idea I stole point blank out of the Strengths-Based Leadership book. And it is this thought of, instead of just calling it a routine meeting or a daily checkup, is there something you really want to accomplish from that you could use better words to say that from the very beginning? Along stability, think about asking yourself, who needs to hear their value today? And how can you reflect the potential in others back to them? Often we talk about positivity as being really well aligned and positioned for great recognition. I think communication also has that same muscle that needs to be flexed. How can you put the worth and the effectiveness of the folks on your team on purpose down on paper and reflect it back to them? And finally, we'll talk about hope. Just got this thought. I'd like you to think, in what direction do my words take people? Or in what direction do my words leave people? Are you reviewing the past and leaving it there? Remember, hope is the belief that tomorrow is going to be better than today and that you have the ability to make it so. So are you being forward facing with the stories that you're telling? Are you leaving people in a place where they're thinking about tomorrow, where they're thinking about the future? And how could you get better at painting a clearer, more inviting picture of the future? So hopefully some great things to think about for leaders with communication. At this point, we've hopefully set the stage so that we're all on the same page, speaking a truly common language around what communication is and what it looks like in a leader. And now I want to introduce one of my favorite people. She's a great leader actually here at Gallup, and you will just see communication ooze right out of her. Sara, Vander, Helm, welcome to the program.
Hi, thank you, Maika, for having me.
Great. Sara, can you just kick us off by telling us a little bit about who you are and what you do here at Gallup?
Sure. So I am Sara Vander Helm. I'm a performance manager, and I spend my time thinking about learning and development and also engagement as it relates to our outbound interviewing. So I work in the division, which is as far as, Gallup history, thinking about really where we came from, the Gallup portion of who we are, interviewing and polling. And that's really where I've grown up at Gallup. I've been here for about 21 years, next week, 21. So.
Wow, excellent. Yeah. Thanks for sharing all that talent with the world. How have you noticed communication in your leadership?
Oh, wow. Communication is hard not to notice, right? People notice all the time. I think that I'm always talking. I notice that I'm always talking, and I try to be real mindful of that. But I think as a leader, people need you to give them the words sometimes. And I know you touched on this a little bit, Maika, but I think that it's really helpful to be able to put people's thoughts into more impactful paragraphs, into phrases that do stick with people. So I liked what you said about how maybe communication helps us be a little bit stickier with our messages. I think sometimes I'm able to do that for my constituents also. I think I'm able to take their idea that, maybe we've brainstormed and sort of fumbled through and kind of boil it down into something that's really palatable and something that people can really take with them and will have that stick. So I think that's really helpful because you have to remember, in my role, I'm a leader of leaders. So the people that I work with are incredible leaders in their own right, and they're actually leading the interviewers who are part of our interviewing centers, right? So there's a population of about 500 interviewers, and our team of about 20 leaders lead them. And that's the group that I touch the most and that I get to spend my days with. And I'm really fortunate to do so. So it's really nice to be able to be in a space where leading leaders, again, it's so ingrained with them, right? This kind of strengths concept and being an amazing star maker is so ingrained with them and born in them. So it makes my job so much more fun because I get to help them be more of who they are, and they already have this so greatly, with them. So
I notice even in the language that you choose to describe being a manager. You just said star maker. I mean, is that an example of communication and, saying really upfront where you want to go?
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, I think, it's always those dynamics that you're talking about with other themes and things like that. But I think absolutely it's about, speaking the truth of where you want to be. So star making, I'm not even sure that's a phrase I made up. I think it's one that is in really the description and the folklore, again, of when we describe what it is to be a leader at Gallup and a manager of people in particular, that our job is to remove any obstacle that might stand between you and all of the wild success that you're trying to reach, right? So I'm just knocking down barricades. That's my deal, right? But it's so nice to work with these people who are also built that way and also, just gunning in that same direction, which is so fun.
I don't always think about communication as knocking down barricades. How does it help you do that?
Yeah. Words are powerful, right? And I think there's a piece to this communication where, you are able to say things in a way that people need to hear them, not just in a way that sounds good. Right. So there's a difference. You can say something that's, eloquent and it sounds like you are good at stringing words together, or you can say things in a way that's really tailored to the person that you're speaking to. And I think that's what communication does, because it can change minds. And I don't mean that in a manipulative way. I mean that in a, really trying to boil it down to brass tacks of what matters here, and helping people to see all the sides and bringing all the sides of that. And I think that's the power in knocking down barricades, helping people, in particular in my job, helping people to see potential that they're not feeling yet, but painting that picture of what that success will look like and helping them to see that they're closer than they think, right? And I think communication can do that with the power of putting together those phrases that they need to hear.
Do you have go-to phrases or go-to stories that tend to work, or is it more on the fly, in the moment, you come up with it and it just shows up?
I think it is so, I have individualization pretty high, positivity pretty high. And so I think it is a little bit more on the fly. It's not that often that I have to, when I'm going into a conversation, really think about, okay, what am I going to say, or how is this going to come out? I think it's more that I can bullet. I think I'm good at bulleting in my mind, like what are the outcomes that I want from this conversation? And then the words tend to come and support that. And I think that's probably a little bit more the way that I do it.
That makes sense. I should have asked, you mentioned individualization and positivity. What else do you have high on your profile?
Yeah. So those are supporters. Those are 7 and 8. Number 1 is communication. I like to say communication is sometimes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then, but others in the front seat there would be communication, competition, woo, maximizer, and which are all influencers. And then my one and only strategic thinking theme in my top 5 that I hang on to for dear life, which is input. So, and I think that supports my communication too, because frankly, I just remember a lot of words. I have a lot of words, let's just say, for those that like me who have preschoolers and toddlers at my house, I have a lot of words. So
I was going to say that's exactly what daycare said about my 2-year-old this week. He has a lot of words.
I'm not surprised. Simon has a lot of words. Yeah.
Maika, let me jump in really quick. SB had a question in the chat room about communicating in situations. So you have high communications, Sara, but oftentimes we run into situations where we might be going up against a tense situation or someone who's kind of resistant to what we have to say. Mm-hmm. And we have to kind of come in carefully. Well, how do you approach that? I'll talk a little bit about how I do, but how do you approach that when you know you're going into a situation, you want to communicate the truth, you need to, but you know it's coming on difficult ears? Yeah, that's an interesting one. It's one that I think about a lot. I will say that my communication edge has really been sharpened over the years, and I've truly learned the value of listening. There are people in my life, maybe my husband, who would say I still don't do enough of it, but I absolutely would come into that conversation setting up the tone of what's about to happen and what we're about to discuss. But then,
yes, doing a lot of listening, and then being able to circle back. Okay, well, where can we find areas where, you know, what you're saying is true and what I'm saying is true, and we can. I think I'm pretty adept at closing the loop at the end, but that listening in the middle, I think, is the piece where, you know, when people think of communicators, they really think of talkers, and you forget that communication is, at least for me, about a conversation, and a conversation doesn't happen with me in a mirror. Well, sometimes, but not all the time. So I think it's that. I think it's just being open to listening, and what I always hope is that people who are communicating with me and in conversation with me know that I'm open through the way that I just say all the things all the time, which means that I receive as well as I give in terms of wanting to be part of that conversation. So I think that openness just sets the tone. When it does have to be tricky sometimes, I mean, you do have to have hard conversations. It happens all the time in the life of any kind of leader, really.
Yeah, no, for sure. Maika, any thoughts as we think about difficult conversations going in and using that communication in your favor?
I love what Sara said about closing the loop. I think that's probably a different, if you think about communication as a toolkit, that's one of the tools that's within the communication box, is not just how do I make a point, but maybe how do I reflect back other people's points? So think about if you're going into a difficult situation, can you summarize? Can you use that great ability with words to serve other people? Say something like, hey, I think you're saying this. Is it accurate? Mm-hmm. Or here's what I feel like I'm hearing. Are we on the same page? And sometimes I think you have to have your job to be the only person in the room who can do that really well. And it can set your bias at the door if you do it on purpose. And you say, okay, right now I'm going to be more of a reporter, and then I'm going to come back and be a subject matter expert. But you could probably do both with high communication. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. And I like to use that communication to repeat back what I'm hearing. So I think my communication works best when I'm thinking out loud. And so I'm thinking some of my best ideas. I go, oh, I've said that. I really like that idea. It wasn't fully formed, but talking about it kind of helped. I find with people where it's a difficult conversation, Sara, you mentioned the listening. To be able to repeat it back, you have to listen. Mm-hmm. And so I have found that if I'm listening to repeat it back to understand what they're saying and thinking through that process, giving them the opportunity to speak first, and then repeating it back from what I've heard often grants me some access or some credibility to be able to overcome that, right? To overcome that situation. Mm-hmm. There is another kind of question. Some people, no matter what you do, Maika, let me throw this to you really quick. No matter what you do in difficult situations, just keep talking. And so you open that door and they just spew, right? And they don't ever stop talking. And Sara, be thinking about this too, Maika, when we're in those situations, how do we, from a leadership standpoint, how do we embrace that, or how do we use that to our advantage?
When somebody won't stop talking.
Yeah. What do you do? I mean, how do you
it's usually me.
It may be another communicator, right? I mean, it may be someone who has communication high, who needs to just kind of vent, and we're trying to get some constructive things done. And yet, how do we have that, you know, how do we interrupt, or what do we do in those situations where in that difficult situation, they just continue to spew?
I think we have to look for what's behind it. You know, are they uncomfortable? Are they scared? Are they sad? Are they tired? And maybe you can look for, what can you name? Again, lean into that communication piece. And can you give it a title? Can you say, hey, is this are we in the sad chapter right now? Is that really what's happening here? Or ask better questions, you know, ask questions that force them to stop and think. And I don't have a whole lot of executing themes, so I'm not so sure that getting through what you need to get through is important, or is more important than letting somebody get to where they need to go in the moment. But that's my own bias. Sara, what does that make you think about?
I'm thinking the same thing as you, is that all that would matter in that scenario is just what a person needs to say, right? But I do have some executing themes high where I do like to get to an end game. I don't know. I guess my feeling is just that you've got to give people a chance, but when there is a timeline, there's a timeline. And so somehow you have to find a way to productively move forward. But as I say that, this example of how I I think out loud and then I say a thing and then I want it back right away because I don't agree with what I just said. And that is what it is to think out loud. You're really not going to have a productive time together if there's a hang up that we can't get through, right? So I just don't know if you can get the job done until somebody can get out what they need to get out, right? So that's a tricky part, I think.
Yeah, and I think sometimes as leaders, we're going to run up against those situations where it's not going to end happy. That's not going to have a happy ending, right? And it's, I think sometimes this is tough for that woo communication combo, which shows up a lot, is we want to win that person and we just keep talking and talking and talking to them. And as leaders, providing this stability, right? This as a leader, we're going to do what as we are working together as a team, we've set these guidelines and these rules, and this is what we're going to follow, and this is how we're going to do it, setting that stability in a team setting. Sarah, I'm sure there's been times you just had to end the conversation and say, this is the way it is, right?
Yeah. I mean, I also think that there's value in the bookmark, which is to say that sometimes we're just not going to have a resolution right now. Sometimes we're going to have to walk away. And with communication high, it's the last thing I want to do. I want everybody to get out what they want to get out, what they need to get out. But sometimes, there are bookmarks. We're going to have to press pause. There's power and value in the pause. And we're going to have to agree to disagree and come back and figure it out on the other side, maybe after we've had more time to think, to conceptualize what the other person's trying to say, whatever that might be, but to come back to it. And I think that's something that it behooves communicators to remember, is that it doesn't have to be just all laid out on the table right now and this is my one shot. And I think that's something that, I still work on learning every day, to be honest, that this isn't the last word. There will be a lot more words and a lot of future times. And we can bookmark it right now if we need to.
That's a great.
I love that. I think it's also important to look at, what is it that's bothering us about this? Is it a timing issue? Is it a disagreement? Is it that we just don't understand what they're saying? Or is it that we don't like the words that they're using to say it? And I think when you've got that intimate relationship with words, you need to get more intimate with it, right? Really be able to clarify and sort through what's actually happening, what's bothering us and what's not.
Maika, there's been some chat in the chat room about Toastmasters, and when we think of ways to build on our top of our communication, any thoughts to those kinds of programs? I mean, Toastmasters is the most famous for helping people communicate. Sarah, kind of what I heard you saying in some of that is oftentimes we have to craft that communication, and maybe craft it by writing it down or doing something first before we speak it out loud to humans, to other humans. But Maika and Sara, think about this too. Any thoughts to these programs like a Toastmaster where we can go and practice and get constructive feedback on the way we're saying things?
It sounds like heaven for a communication person. That's my reaction. Yeah, my gosh, can you imagine sitting around talking to other people about talking? I love this idea that I think it's just a super strengths-based idea that, yeah, it's something you do really well. So don't dismiss it. Don't take it for granted. Think about it as a great way to something to build upon. See the potential in it and get better. Sarah, what do you think?
Any thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. I never was part of Toastmasters. That's not something that I've ever done. But I mean, certainly so many of the people in my life who, come from a theater background or any kind of performance, I think Maika, you, myself, all of us really just think through, what are ways to hone this craft by being, not to say that every communicator needs to be in front of people to thrive or to even, or even to want to do that, of course. But I think it is a great way to again, hone that craft, to be able to be in front of people. And again, Toastmasters is a great way to think about that. And I also think there are a lot of people who are great communicators who don't like the notoriety of that. There are people in my life that, sometimes I'll go back through. I'm fortunate that I get to access their profiles, right? So there are leaders that I can think of, one in particular who I'll meet with later today, who has communication in his top 5. He is never the first one to talk in a meeting. He's never the one to leave it all out on the table. I sometimes have to pull it out of him, right? But when he talks, oh my gosh, I will just listen and hang on every word because he's got it. He just doesn't have the need to put it all out there the way that some of the rest of us do, right? So.
Wow, that maybe I could take a lesson from. You know,
Right,
like you said
right.
earlier, Sarah, there's power in the pause. You know, I think about communication, just being able to do both sides.
Sure.
Yeah, that's great. Sarah, when you think about those four needs of followers, stability,
Yeah.
trust, compassion, and hope, is there one of them that jumps out to you as being closely linked to communication for you?
I think hope. So what you were saying earlier is like exactly the way that I think about it in my mind. Again, with Positivity High, I am always about, you know, what's next though? Like I know this now, yes, I want to honor this, I want to do this now, but what's next, right? And so I think that hope piece, I think that communicators really have this powerful way of being casters, right? Of just this vision casting and thinking through what's next, you know? And I think that when you have communication, you can have a fact about what's next. And maybe it's just a simple sentence, but you can paint that picture and just zhuzh that thing up in so many ways that it becomes something completely different. And, you know, so maybe the reality of it is X, but it becomes, you know, the entire alphabet of pictures and you know, then this will be the reality when this is the case. When this physical tactical thing happens, then this will be all the great things that can happen around that. And I think with communication, you're able to see that painting because you have the words to be able to create what it could look like in someone's mind, right? And so the hope piece, I mean, I definitely think that as far as stability and trust and everything else, transparency, openness, everything that comes with being a person who again thinks out loud, all of that I think can instill trust and stability with your constituents and with your partners. But the hope piece is what I hold on to the most. It's what I hope that I leave people with, that I want to do right by them.
I love the hope piece. I also love what you said about when you're somebody who thinks out loud, you can't help but be transparent. And I think that maybe that's a difference. I still struggle. How do I help people understand the difference between being a good communicator and having high communication as a talent?
Yes.
And maybe that's one of them. Sometimes that resonates when I'm trying to help people sort that out, that people with high communication aren't just good presenters. They really have, it's like they share a brain with their mouth. You know, it's not just all.
And sometimes they don't.
And sometimes they don't, right? It's that thinking out loud,
right.
working through things alongside people. Does that ever get dangerous as a leader?
You know, I think so, because because I think best in conversation with a person. I say this to my husband all the time, that I sometimes don't even know what I think until I say it out loud to him. And then sometimes I say, oh my gosh, I don't really think that. Like, I'm taking that one back. I'm going to try it again, which is an easy thing to do when you're writing and you take your eraser. But when you are a verbal communicator, the way that I am, that's hard, and it gets you in some sticky situations that way. But yeah, I guess. Yeah, that
is. So do you find just a safe place that you can do that? Or do you say, hey guys, I might not mean everything that I'm about to say? What have you found works?
Yeah, it's tricky. Yeah, it's really hard. It's why I love brainstorming more than anything, because I think when you're brainstorming and you frame it up as brainstorming, I liked what you said about whatever the meeting is, call it what it is, right? It's not just a meeting, but like name it. I love to call things brainstorming. In my calendar all day long, you're going to see brainstorming, because I think there's no commitment to brainstorming, right? So what's great about it is we can throw a lot of stuff at the wall. We're going to see what sticks. But I think getting back to what you asked about the pitfalls of this thinking out loud, I think that that's part of my partnerships with people, is that they know I'm probably going to try out a few things that I either need to refine that thought before we would go wide with it, or, you know, maybe it's something that then they tell me that then that soaks in and it becomes something different. But I do have this way, it's something that, you know, I really think about a lot, and not in wanting to mitigate against, is that I am persuasive, but I can also be easily persuaded. So there's something about that communication and taking the input of information and words that then can modify what I think. So sometimes at the beginning of a meeting, I say one thing, and at the very end of it, I'm like, I know it sounds like I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth, but I actually think this now because of that refining and the brainstorming, kind of element. My mind can be changed pretty easily, which I think also instills that trust and stability with the people that I work with, because they know that I'm very rarely coming into a thing where this is the bottom line and this is what I think and you're never going to move me. I am very easily moved, when there's a compelling picture that gets painted. So I receive as well as I give where that's concerned. And I think that gets me out of trouble is the answer to your question.
It sounds like if you're going to be transparent, just commit to being transparent. If you can tell people, hey, I'm changing my mind now, then they know that where you were before, they get to see the process of where you're going and where you're ending. And a safe space to do it, like a brainstorming meeting.
I've learned to start meetings where I know I might start fires by just speaking, by saying that phrase. Guys, for a second, I just need to ideate. Like I have ideation 8. And so, I will say that. Be very, very clear. I'm going to say these things. You are welcome to debate them with me, but I need to work through these things with you because I need to work through them. I'm not good. Communication 4 for me, by the way. I'm also not good at doing meetings on the phone where I can't see people. I need that feedback. Some of what we do here on Theme Thursday is because I'm so terrible at just phone conversations. I get bored. I start doing other things like, totally. Check an email, right? And so I've kind of insisted either in person or it's got to be video. And I want to make that eye contact. And Maika, you and I have done a ton of this where we just get together and just start rolling through ideas. You, Mike, and I, Mike McDonald the other day, had 2 sessions like this where we just began to kind of work through those things, and they can be very valuable. But I have found I have some partners here at Gallup that I can't do that with. And I have to learn to not go into the room and just spew. I've got to be ready or have been practiced. Maika, sometimes you're my practice partner where I do the call, you're my pre-call, and I run some ideas by you and you help me hone some things out. And then I'm going to that meeting. So I think we have to learn to do some of those things too, where we just don't go in front of, I think SP had said, she's got a C-level employee that has command high, and that's not going to happen. So you have to kind of practice that piece. And so that's what worked well for me, is knowing those relationships, not expecting them to adapt to me, but me to them. And then using my communication to the advantage in there and have it well laid out and ready to go when I meet with them. So that's kind of what that's worked for me on that level.
I think about yesterday, Jim, you and I and Mike were on a phone conversation, and I actually said, it was a follow-up call, and I told you out loud, I was like, hey, I know we had this one idea, but I need you guys to talk me back into it so I can get back into the zone. And I had to say that out loud because that's exactly where I was. I admitted that I wasn't in the place, and it wasn't something that I could have read my notes and got it. I realized I need to talk back into this idea. And I almost felt it was an accident. I didn't mean to say that, but I might say that again because it's this idea of how do you signpost to other people where you are in your story. Communicating with people who don't have communication, really alerting them, hey, we're back to square one, or we're kind of in the middle of something, or I need you to help me get into the middle of something. I think it helps boost that idea, Sara, that you just gave me of the kind of transparency that you can have with high communication and still provide stability and help people not feel like they're spinning all around when they try to follow you.
Right.
Sara, I'm curious, what kind of partners, you mentioned partners before, maybe your husband saying, I just need to talk through this, but what kind of partners are really most beneficial for you?
I love other communicators. I love people who know the value of words and choose their words wisely. And I just because they get me going, I love that. I love to steal phrases, and if you're not going to copyright it, I will take it from you if I think it's great. And so I like people who are wordsmiths. I like this. I like talking to you guys where you're saying things that make me think about a thing in a new way, and to keep those words because they're really tangible to me. They are like my little pets, right? And not creepy, but a little creepy.
Little word pet.
But yeah, so little word pets, it's fine. Anyway, so I love partnering with communicators. I love partnering with people who have ideation. Some of my best partners have a ton of ideation. Mike is one. I can think of other best friends at work that have huge ideation that I like to partner with a lot, because sometimes it's great for them to, again, they're doing that visioning, and then my casting kind of gets about it and goes, okay, I love where this is going. And now I'm already writing the email in my mind. I'm already crafting it, like how we're going to put this out to everybody. And I think it's just a great way for us to be able to do that. So I think, like, when I think about my very best friend at work, Rachel, super high ideation. She is amazing at sitting down with me. We brainstorm. And then all of a sudden we have like this real thing that we're able to just send. And it's magic because of the thinking and the talking that kind of gets together there. I think those are my favorites.
You mentioned, I loved what you said about, I can't help but write it down. I'm already writing the email in my brain.
Mm-hmm.
Do you find that you're composing ideas all the time? Is that something that just never stops?
All the time. And I don't sometimes I just wonder if that's normal. Like, I laugh about that a lot, or I'm always, even when I'm taking photos of my kids, I find myself writing that Facebook post like in my head while we're just going about our day, and then I'll type it up at night, and then my husband will look at it and I'll say, is this as funny as I think it is? Like, is this landing the right way? But I've already thought about it for an hour, and at work in particular, I think with communication, I am always thinking about how is this message going to be received? So I'm fortunate to be part of a lot of conversations in a day that are about what we're going to do, right? So what's our strategy? What's our plan? How are we going to execute? And then I'm also fortunate that I have partners who see in me that I might be uniquely talented to be able to tell that story to others, to cast that out. And so I think, again, it's lucky that I get to be again, part of the strategy, but then also part of, okay, but how is this going to land? And I find myself often saying, if we say it this way, though, it will have deaf ears, or, it isn't going to get the hype that we're going to need it to have. And so crafting and recrafting that way. And I'm really fortunate that I have partners that let me do that, that let me be part of that, because the reception of an idea matters so much more than the idea to me. So
that might be the quote for this whole thing. The reception of the idea matters more than the idea itself. That's just phenomenal. Yes. I didn't warn you that I was going to ask you this question because I didn't know. So sorry, forgive my ideation here.
I'm all right.
You're one of my favorite people on Facebook to follow because of the nuggets of stories that you can give. And I retell the funny things that your girls say about to people who don't even know them. My favorite was flipping a penny and calling it heads or carousels.
Right? Who
and the
knew
way
that
you had said it, just stuck in my mind. I don't know how long ago that was. If you flip over the end of a penny,
so funny. Who
kind of looks
no
like
one
a
ever
carousel.
thought. It does. It really does. The Lincoln Memorial, just like a carousel. And that's a thing now in our family. Like, now we just say, we flipped a coin last night if we were going to watch Annie the original or Ratatouille, and we flipped, and Holly called carousels and Piper called heads, and it's amazing. So yeah, it's a thing now.
You create folklore as much as you pay attention to it. How does communication show up and help you be a better mom?
Oh my gosh. My kids have so many words, so many words that my husband is for sure just drowning in the words and the thoughts that come out all day long. And I thought, Holly is my oldest, and she is 5, and she's always been a big talker. And then 2 years later, when Piper came along, she's 3, I didn't think she would be, because you always hear, and in the incessant blogs that I read and all the parenting books and things, it all says, that the second one's going to be quiet, or that you'll have one or the other, and all of this. And Piper, I will tell you what, not fewer words, way louder. I think she figured out that if you're going to get a word in with Mom and Holly, you just have to be straight loud. And so that's what she is, just as many words. You know, and I think that's what comes through as a mom. I think I give them a lot of words for their emotions. I think that I'm really mindful all the time about, in our house, you don't get to be, but it's difficult for you to just be upset and there's nothing to that. Does that make sense? So, you know, I think Ryan and I both do a good job of trying to say, are you frustrated about this? Or are you, you know, kind of like what Jim was saying, you know, I think I'm hearing you say this, or, you know, give them these words. But I think that because of the communication, they have an ability to articulate what's going on with them just better than the average bear, right? In that way. And I think also, you know, when you're a person who covets words the way that I do, you kind of can't help but breed that into your household. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So I think, and that openness also, I think they know that they can say anything to me. And I think all 3 and 5-year-olds, by the way, have an inherent, of course, natural trust with their parents and can do or say anything. But, you know, I think because of the communication, that could continue long past when they're preschoolers, right? So.
You know, Maika, that's a great question, because I think oftentimes parenting is some of the very early and first tests of hardcore leadership. And leading your kids is one of the hardest things on the planet. I mean, it is just, they're with you all the time, and you knew them when they were small and they pooped all over you and that kind of stuff, right? You know all those things, and yet leading them in providing that stability and hope, and compassion and trust in this environment is often very difficult. So I think, you know, if you want to see how you are in leadership, and if you're at that spot where you're a parent, oftentimes I think your true colors as a leader comes out in the way you parent. And I learned I learned some serious tricks about how to manage people from managing my own children. And so it is really important for me, I think, honing that communication in this context, honing that communication talent can be done at home long before you get into the workplace, or you're put in a leadership role, or you want to see your true colors. It comes out in those most stressful situations, sometimes at home. So, Maika, that's the way it's been for me. 28 years of parenting, 5 children in the process, and watching the last one make her way into college this fall. And man, I've learned a lot about leadership through watching and observing myself through parenting. I don't know, Sara, you guys have younger kids. Do you feel that? Mm-hmm. Do you feel that same thing, Maika?
I just feel tired. Yeah, but you know, let's go back to what Sara said. I just love the thought of, I give them a lot of words. I bet you do that for your team members and for the leaders who you lead at work too. It's almost an easier way to study who you are as a leader. It's just a different way to learn about who you are. But I bet that your team would say that you've given them lots of ways to define what they're going through, or to stretch their ideas, because you provide them more words. And that is no small feat.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope that, you know, they're so different from me, and yet we're also similar to each other also. But, you know, sometimes they're way more thinkers. Some of my closest partners I can think of spend a lot of time in their heads, kind of between their 2 ears. And I think that when you have communication, you can't spend too much time in there, because everything just spins and doesn't really make a ton of sense. So I'd like to think, and so it has to come out, right? But I'd like to think that for those thinkers, that because I do say a lot of words, that they somehow have different information to catalog and make the spreadsheets that are in their minds, right? Different than the Word document in mine.
Totally. And you know, your example to say I'm angry and that's it. Like, that's very different. Jim, I didn't mean to dodge your question with being funny, but my 2-year-old started a brand new care situation. He's in preschool, we're calling it now, instead of with a nanny. And it's good to remember, I mean, he comes home hoarse every day because he's narrating what's going on all the time. And it's something he always does with me. I mean, he'll talk about the big yellow truck and the big white car, and they're turning left, and just all day long. But I know that he's losing his voice at school because there's a lot more to talk about. And He's also crying like crazy every morning, which is normal, and he'll get over it. But I have to remember, oh, I'm dealing with another leader in this 2-year-old who's also very transparent, and he's telling me every single thing he's going through. So it's a good reminder for me that, like, he's not super upset. He's just letting me into every single idea. And sometimes I mean, that's what I hope people understand about me with my communication is I'm not a roller coaster. I'm showing you everything. So
that is the quote of the session for me. That's absolutely true.
Whew, that helped me get through the first week of daycare. So thanks for the group therapy there, guys.
You're almost through. You have 2 days left. So.
Maika, we get that Carol Ann McGuire always brings that question. What does this theme look like in the context of a teenager or a child? And I think we've done a pretty good job. As you guys have brought, I think your son is a great example of that. When we have it sounds like he's going to have some high communication in his top 5 here in the future, and he's just always on. And he's communicating his emotions and his feelings and his love for you and all those things through words. And he gets better at it, I'm sure, the more he does it. And for some of us, not me in particular, but for some of us, that can be a little overwhelming, right? Especially for those thinkers and intellection and analytical, that maybe is too much. And so, but just some good clues to talent as we see some of those things and really appreciate what they're for. My mom saw this in me early and put me in situations like 4-H and, we mentioned Toastmasters early, where I could present and I could talk and I could, I did these speeches, and with my mom recognizing, she gave me a jump ahead on my own talents because she put me in situations where I could practice. I was in plays. I did these kinds of things where I could work through that stuff. And so, as we think about parenting or in leadership, or even when we think about team roles, if you've got that communicator in your team and they're driving you crazy because you're talking all the time, give them more opportunities to represent you in public, right? And they're going to need practice, but there's some great avenues you can put them in and make them spokespeople, right? They'll never get tired of it. Let them recruit for you. All of a sudden, I'm explaining my job here at Gallup, right? Let them represent you. So there's some great opportunities as leaders to take those communicators and really sharpen them and put them in some situations where they can really thrive.
Super cool. So Sara, I want to give you kind of the last word here before we wrap up. If you were, it just sounds like you've done an amazing mindful job of studying and getting to know your communication and maturing it and growing it. If you were to give any advice to other leaders with communication, what would you want to make sure they know?
I think just to know that it's okay. It's okay to be the person who's always talking. And, I think in any theme, when you feel it in your soul the way that we do, ultimately you need validation around it. And I think the validation that I would offer is that someone else doesn't want to always be talking. And so, of course, you have to be listening. And so do that earlier maybe than I've learned to in my life and in my career. But remember that you don't have to make excuses for the fact that this is the way that you think. And don't make excuses for the fact that this is the way that you feel, and that sometimes you don't really know what you think or feel until it comes out of you. And that's allowed. And I just think that's really important to know, because I think that when you're the jabbermouth in the room, right? When you're the one who's, on my grade school report cards, always disrupting the class because I was always talking. Like, yes, I had to learn that, of course, that it shouldn't always be me talking. But if you can add value to a situation, remember that that's okay. It's okay if you're the one talking, as long as you're doing equal parts of listening and synthesizing and then making something better through the communication, not just for yourself, but for the people who get to be part of it, right? Everyone should be able to kind of bask in the glory of all of our strengths, right? So I shouldn't be the only one who gets the kickback from talking a lot. Someone else should be getting something out of it too, and I should get something out of their ideation and their intentionality around activator or whatever that might be. But don't ever forget the value of it, and don't let anyone or anything make you think that it's not valuable, because it's not just words. It's bigger than that.
Another quote of the day: it's not just words, it's bigger. Thanks, Sara. Thanks for being a lot more than just words. There's such a and like, to borrow your word, there's such an intentionality behind the way that you just knock down barriers with your words and lead other people and inspire hope and grow two awesome kids at the same time.
Yeah,
So
thanks.
thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks, you guys. It was a blast.
Great to have you, Sara. And hey, we made it a whole session, 3 communicators without stepping all over each other. So it can be done that way as well. Sara, thanks for coming on. Hang tight for 1 second. We'll remind everyone to take full advantage of all the resources we have available at the Gallup Strength Center, just gallupstrengthcenter.com. You can send us your questions or comments if you'd like to be a guest blogger on our coach's blog. We'd ask that you'd send us kind of a fully formed blog. We're looking for some 400 to 600 words. Send it to us in email, coaching@gallup.com. Put guest blogger in the subject line, and we'll make sure we route that to Maika for consideration. We can't take them all, but we'd love to consider your original work. You can also catch the recorded audio and video of this program, as well as all the past ones we have available for you. Remember, we're in season 3, so we have 2 seasons of communication out on YouTube or available via audio. If you haven't downloaded those yet or listened to those, you want to do that as well. Everything, the links to find it, look in the topics tab if you want to find everything on communication out at coaching.gallup.com. If you're interested in becoming a Gallup certified strengths coach, you can see a list of all the courses that lead to that certification available on our website, courses.gallup.com. Don't forget, we have other podcasts available. Theme Thursday, this one, Called to Coach, which we do if you're interested in that coaching arena, all available on your iPhone or Android. Just search Theme Thursday, Called to Coach, and we have one called Polling Matters available for you out there on that site. If you found this helpful, we ask that you share it. We want to thank everyone for joining us today. We'll be back in another week with another Theme Thursday. And with that, we'll say goodbye, everybody.